Hello, and welcome back to MetalDisciple.com's The Week in Reviews. My name is George, and this time I have a trio of superb albums for you. I've got the latest from Bloody Hammers, Tombs, and Septicflesh. Bloody Hammers from Charlotte, North Carolina, have returned with their third album, Under Satan's Sun. In case you're wondering, this is a big deal. Bloody Hammers is turning out to be quite prolific, as this is their third album in as many years. Last year's Spiritual Relics introduced me to the band and surprised me with how quickly and how much it grew on me. When I learned that Under Satan's Sun was imminent, I became excited and thought myself prepared, but once again, Bloody Hammers managed to surprise and impress me. The music on Under Satan's Sun is probably technically doom metal, but it leans heavily in a hard rock direction as well. When I first listened to this album, around a month ago, I got the impression of End of Green with a dash of twisted Marilyn Manson flavor, but there was something else nagging at my awareness that I could not quite put my finger on. It wasn't until the other day, as I listened to the album again on the treadmill at the gym, where everything falls away and the music becomes all, that I figured out what else these songs bring to mind. Despite the band hailing from the East Coast, the songs on Under Satan's Sun make me think of a blazing Texas sun, bleaching bones half buried in sand as tumbleweeds roll past. Once my mind turned toward that region of the country, it didn't take me long to make the short jump to Louisiana and acid bath. It hit me like a lightning bolt. Anders' voice frequently reminds me of the clean style used by Dax Riggs on the Acid Bath albums. My love for Bloody Hammers grew 3 sizes that day. Probably the biggest change I've noticed to Bloody Hammer's sound in this past year is the much more reserved and tight production. The instrumentation on Under Satan's Sun sounds really good, while also managing to stay completely out of the way of the vocals. Most of the songs on the album give the vocals an incredibly vast amount of breathing room, which gives the songs an intimate and also kind of creepy feel, which I simply love. I had the misfortune the other day to read another review of this album, which came across as pretty much the polar opposite of my one-man orgy of delight. This other reviewer compared Bloody Hammers to acts such as The Devil's Blood, Jex Thoth, and Blood Ceremony, and said those bands pull off the style much better. It was at that point that the reviewer lost all credibility with me. In my opinion, the 3 aforementioned bands are the unfortunate runoff resulting from the popularity of Ghost, and their horribly underproduced, muddy-sounding offerings are both boring and unlistenable. Don't worry, Bloody Hammers, I got your back. These songs are incredibly infectious and catchy, and they exude a dark, horror-punk Misfits kind of vibe, while demonstrating a decidedly more technical proficiency. Several times this past week, I woke up with lyrics ringing incessantly in my head as I stumbled groggily towards the shower. It took me a couple days to figure it out, but it was the line, "There is a killer among us all, a phantom that has come to see you fall," from the album's opening track, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Bloody Hammers get stuck in your head. So, you can listen to a reviewer that comes across like a smug elitist that probably enjoys taking bands down a notch more than actually listening to music, but wouldn't you rather take the word of a guy who lives and breathes metal and loves nothing more than to spread the good word about all the great music he comes across? Trust me, Under Satan's Sun is a fantastic album, and I will back that up by guaranteeing you that it will be in my top 10 albums of 2014. Go check out the video for The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and remember me when you wake up tomorrow morning with the words stuck in your head. As one who constantly sifts through seemingly endless piles of new metal releases from bands all around the world, I often feel like I'm hearing the same things over and over and over again. The average music listener may simply filter out anything that does not strike their fancy and focus on a few select bands that interest them. Even if those bands are not all that original, the listener may not have heard the 100 other bands that sound similar, and so for them, these bands have meaning. I try to keep this in mind as I pick and choose what to cover, because sometimes I pass over bands that are technically good but play in a style or remind me of a band that I have heard far too much of already. Then you have bands like Tombs that just make it easy for me. I remember back in 2011 when Tomb's last album, Path of Totality, was released to much fanfare from the metal reviewer community. I thought I knew what the band was about, and so I never really gave the album a listen. When 2011 came to an end, all the lists rolled out and many featured Tombs, so I decided I really better sit down and give them a listen. Boy, was I surprised! What a massively heavy and interesting album it turned out to be. They had my attention. Naturally, when news arrived this spring of an impending new Tombs album, Savage Gold, I began to salivate like Pavlov's dog. I began checking my email incessantly, hoping to find that a promo download had arrived. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait more than a couple of weeks before sweet Savage Gold would fill my ears. My habit of late has been to listen to new music at the gym, where I can turn the full attention of my mental faculties towards the music, while my physical extremities toil in sweaty torment. Listening to Savage Gold that first time at the gym was one of those moments when you know you've heard something really special. This ties back into where I started this review about how Tombs makes reviewing easy for me. When I hear something so grand and yet so unlike the majority of the music I hear on a daily basis, it is very difficult not to fall hard and fast. So I don't even bother to fight it. I just submit. Where Path of Totality had an all-encompassing and vast sound that enveloped the listener in a sludgy post-metal apocalypse, Savage Gold has a less ethereal ambiance and a more compact and tight production. While this sound is focused to a finer point, it is no less crushingly heavy. I would have been happy with a Path of Totality 2, but Savage Gold shows a band still evolving and maturing, and whets my appetite to find out where they will go next. Path of Totality was the kind of album that music reviewers love for its complexity, but it wouldn't surprise me to find that the average metal fan might not dig deep enough into the sound to find the hidden treasure that lurks within. This music isn't meant to be easy. Savage Gold retains much of that complexity that made the previous album so good, but at the same time, I feel like it has a better chance of finding traction with larger metal audiences. I hope that will be the case because while I love having a great band in my pocket that I can pull out from time to time and fawn over like Gollum and his precious, I take even more satisfaction in seeing a deserving band break big. I have stated on several occasions that the new Triptykon album is the one to beat this year. So far, Tombs is the only other band to seriously make a play for Album of the Year. And at the very least, I would say that barring something mind-bendingly incredible releasing in the next 6 months, you are looking at my number 2 album of 2014. Don't be a fool. Check this album out right now. The Greek symphonic death metal band named Septicflesh first came to my attention 3 years ago with the release of their 8th album, The Great Mass. I know, where was I for those first 7 albums? Beats me, but when I finally came across Septicflesh, I was most pleased. Later that year, I had the good fortune to see the band open a show for Children of Bodom. Septicflesh's music deserves a stage as big as their sound, but it was still inspiring to see them play in a small club. For the past 3 years, I've been waiting impatiently to hear where Septicflesh would venture next. And now, my long watch has ended. This week, the band released their 9th album, Titan. As I nervously queued up the first song, I wondered whether the band would be able to take their massive sound even further. My fears were put to rest during the album opener, War in Heaven. It quickly became apparent the title Titan is apt in more than one way, for these songs are titanic. A non-metal fan listening to symphonic death metal and symphonic black metal may not be able to tell the difference, but to fans of the styles there are apparent differences. For me, that difference takes form in a deeper vocal tone and a more technical guitar style. Behemoth is of course another master of the symphonic death metal style. The production sound on Titan is truly epic. With so many things going on in this mix, it would be easy for things to get all clumped together and muddy. But for the most part, this production is very crisp and clear. Everything on this album sounds so incredibly big. Titan is less a mere listening experience and more of a listening event. How many more different ways can I say that this album crushes? Seriously, I want to simply stand back and gesticulate madly in the direction of Titan, as though to say, "Look, listen, isn't it obvious?" I'm going to cut this short before I try thinking up superfluous ways to try to impress upon you how much you need to hear this album. I will spare you my rambling if you will just go ahead and listen for yourself. Agreed? Alright, that's it for this time. Make sure to check out MetalDisciple.com for more news, reviews, and videos. And don't forget to check out the Metalheads podcast I do with my friend Buke. Take it easy.